Welcome to the Bioptimizers Awesome Health Podcast. And now here's your host, Wade T. Lightheart.
What if you could double your energy naturally without caffeine or stimulants in just 3 short months? It's not only possible, you can transform every aspect of your health if you follow the 12-week blueprint we've created for you in the Awesome Health System. The Awesome Health System is a free course where you receive a daily video lesson spanning the most cutting-edge secrets for air, water, exercise, sunshine, optimizers, mindset, and education. It's something most companies would charge hundreds of dollars for, yet you get it for free when you go to bioptimizers.com. To access your course, register to download the PDF report called 3 Phases of Bioptimization, which gets you access to the report and daily access to the first lesson in the 12-week, 84-day Awesome Health course. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. It's Wade T. Lightheart from Bioptimizers with another edition of the Awesome Health Podcast. And I'm pumped as heck today, as they like to say in the, the profanity free YouTube environment that we are existing in today. We have a special guest today. She's back for the 3rd time on the Awesome Health Podcast because I think she is one of the most fantastic communicators I've ever dealt with. So our guest today is Elle Russ, who is a best-selling author, world-renowned thyroid health expert, and thought leader on confidence and self-esteem. She's actually spoken on both of those topics in earlier issues of the Awesome Health Podcast. Just search Elle Russ and you will find them. Elle has written for Entrepreneur and has been featured in Success, HuffPost, Podcast Magazine, Mind Body Green, Prevention, and more. And she offers affordable online courses and free masterclasses. Elle, welcome back.
So happy to be here. It's always such a great, fun conversation with you. And yeah.
So I think we last talked on the podcast maybe a year ago, something like that.
About a couple of years ago, we did. I think we did one on confidence. That was the second one.
Yes.
You just started your podcast, I think, when you first interviewed me, and now you got hundreds and hundreds of episodes. So.
Yeah, it's crazy. And I know, of course, for people who don't know, you worked a lot in the podcasting, broadcasting area. So can you talk a little bit about your background and some of the cool things you've done in the health industry to kind of so it's an opportunity to toot your own horn. Please update us.
Well, I think like a lot of people, kind of an accident to get into, never was an intention, but I will be talking more about it today. But I struggled with thyroid issues and no doctor could help me. And so I had to educate myself, become my best health advocate and solve it myself, thus becoming a thyroid expert and then jumping into the health space where I'm an author and speaker. But my life really changed when I met Mark Sisson. He's the author of the Primal Blueprint, Keto Reset. He pretty much started and ignited the paleo primal movement maybe 10, 12 years ago, a little bit before that. And following that sort of ancestral path really changed my life. There's a great connection to that way of living and also thyroid hormone metabolism. And so he published my first book and, I hosted his podcast for about 8 years. Then he sold his company to Kraft Heinz. So Primal Kitchen is now owned by them. And then I started my own show called the Elle Russ Show last year. So he was my main mentor and sort of got me into the health space. But it was my trials and tribulations of literally living in a city riddled with some of the best doctors in the world and not being able to find anyone to help me with something that is so easily solvable. It's almost a crime. It's like a dumb tragedy is what it is.
We're at an interesting time, I think, in the world today, which is there's never been more information available. And certainly here in America, and I think that's true worldwide, is our health has never been in a more dire condition as far as when we look at health. I would like to hear, how do you define health? And I think one of the issues is how we define things. So for example, I'll give an unrelated example to set you up. Like we look at, say, we're in Los Angeles, and there's a homeless situation, but it's clear to me if you put all those people in good homes, many of them will be back out on the street. So there's a mental health issue, there's an abuse issue, there's a drug issue. Oftentimes they're correlated. And one of the things that I think we as Americans or people in the North American things is we have an improper definition of health and a methodology in application of how to achieve health and a healthcare system and a regulation system that isn't really that. And so if you can't specify what you are really moving towards, then you have no chance of getting there. So I would like for you, because you're a picture of health, right? You would say an early middle-aged woman. And
I'm 49 years old, feeling
right.
pretty good about looking the way I do for 49. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you look fantastic. You're radiant. Everything I would say, if I was to look at, people that I meet, I say, Elle Russ is healthy. How do you define health?
Well, first I want to just touch on the homeless problem in Los Angeles. So I used to volunteer at homeless shelters. And so 50% of the homeless people in Los Angeles have mental health issues. Okay. I mean, there's literally nothing. I mean, they are, there's a woman in the Pacific Palisades. She's like a famous homeless person. We see her all the time for years. And then they found out her story. She stays in people's homes, sleeps in her car. She's from a gajillionaire family.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter. They just can't keep her anywhere. She's just right. So that's a mental health issue. The other issue is like you said, like the drugs and things like that. So I would go and I've volunteered many times throughout my life, but I found this to be not rewarding. And it's because at the homeless shelter, all we would do is, wash them clothes, give them some things, but I knew they were going to go right back out and turn a trick for heroin. I mean, you just knew it. So you knew that. Granted, what you were giving them was, yes, temporary, you know what I mean? Sure, clean them up, get them to stay a little bit healthier, possibly. But at the end of the day, those are the issues there. Then if you've got the few select people, then they go from there to like a women's shelter with 13 people where they really can show they're willing to try. Those are the ones that are going to go out and get placed in an interview and get back on their feet. And then we're talking about that other 50% that won't. So how do I define health? Well, I think most people would define health like, well, nothing's wrong with me. I don't have any problems. Yeah, but how are you feeling? Because if you're taking naps for 2 hours every day and it's taking you 3 hours to get out of bed and you feel like garbage, so you don't have cancer and you're not like in a hospital, but is that health too? No, it's not. Let's talk about mental health, because you and I both know how food affects the brain. So, you and I both know, like if we had to, or we were in some dire situation, I'll give a great example. I had to evacuate a very serious wildfire here in 2018. Right. And I hadn't eaten anything from the night before to the whole next day at basically it was a whole entire day and night. And later on that night, 12 something hours later, some firefighter brought like a box full of stuff. He had gone into people's houses and gotten food for everyone at the beach who was stranded. And there were like bagels and muffins, and stuff like this. And there was a huge jar of almond butter. And I was like, that's the move. See, that's where you and I would come in. I go, that's the move I'm going to make, because I don't know when I'm getting food next. I don't know how long I'm going to be trapped at the beach. And I know that the fat on this is going to sustain me. This almond butter is going to sustain me way more than this bagel. Do you know what I mean? And so those are the things, just kind of like, okay. So back to the brain. So I was on fire, I was like good to go after that. I was totally fine. Those are the choices I make now based on the knowledge that we have, where I wouldn't have made that shit decision before. I would have gone for the muffin and the bagel, not realizing that is actually the wrong decision, especially through a time of horrible stress, right? So mental health, physical health. But here's the thing, like, are you eating the bowl of pasta at noon and then you're like falling asleep at your desk by 2? That's not healthy either, even though you may not be feeling bad. But how productive are you? How much more creative could you be? How much more attentive and aware in a conversation could you be because your brain is alert? So it's not just like, how's your mind throughout the day? How are your emotions, which are totally related to, the signals we send through food and supplements and everything else, but also like, are you thriving? I mean, are you feeling great? You know what I mean? Look, we all have down days, we all have, I had a bunch of cheesecake over, the holidays. Hey, look, I got a little stuffy and whatever. Was it worth it? Yeah, it was worth it. It's once a year, be a human. You're in Paris, have some bread. That's fine. But in general, how are your day in and day out? And most people that I talk to are in the corporate world with kids and families. They're always complaining about how tired they are. And I go, what time are you going to bed? Midnight? What time are you waking up? 6? That's on you. I mean, at some point, like, that's on you. That's not good health. Lack of sleep will kill you, man. I mean, the most important thing in my life is sleep. 8-9 hours, non-negotiable. Don't talk to me if I have less than 8. And you know what I mean? So people just running ragged, getting more fatter on their middle through cortisol because they're in bed at 1 and up at 6 and going. So, they're always if you're always tired, you're taking naps, you're not being able to focus, you can't read, you're not interested, you're just like home at the end of the day, staring into space, then, you probably need to take a look at your diet.
So you had a major challenge with your own health. So you experienced, we could say, lack of health.
Horrible health. Yes. Miserable every day. Yeah.
You went through a series of medical doctors who basically said that you were crazy, right? And I think there's a lot of people that have struggled with that. Oftentimes the medical industry, if they don't know what's going on, it doesn't exist.
Okay, let's stop right there. So I want to highlight this because this happened the other day where I asked a client I was working with, she couldn't get reverse T3 tested, which is a test that a lot of uninformed doctors wouldn't know about. So instead of admit that he didn't know what it was about, he said, oh, no, we don't do, their ego will rise above and they'll say, oh, it doesn't matter, or that's not applicable. Now, then the mistake the patient makes is that it'll go, well, explain to me why. And if they don't know enough, then they're not going to know enough to be able to challenge the doctor on their stupid answer because it's going to be dumb. So that's an issue, is the ego. What's really great is when you get a doctor who's like, you know what, I don't really know about that. Let me look into it. Sure, I'll test it anyway. And, I don't know anything about it. I don't have the time to look into it. But if you anything other than discounting a patient because they don't know and they're not willing to admit that they don't know because of ego, where's the patient in this? Left in the dust. And that was me. I had a doctor laugh at me, like patronizingly laugh at me when I asked for a B12 test 20 years ago. Guess what? I was deficient in B12, mofos. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And this was the guy who was doing all the wrong tests, who, when I was gaining rapid weight from hypothyroidism and all this stuff, he said, your thyroid's fine. It wasn't. He took a 1973, like one outdated test. He hit my gym shoes with his hand and he said, just use these more and eat less. Wade, I was working out 2 hours a day at the time. I was eating like 1,000 calories. I mean, I was doing whatever I could drastically, and I was still I could eat a grape every day. I'd still gain weight. It doesn't really matter. So I was gaslit the entire time by just, he didn't know better. He was uninformed. And then gaslighting the patients, being like, well, it's your fault, or you're lying about what you're eating, or you have a closet eating disorder. And people are told that all the time. And instead, you have a doctor then, like my doctor, Dr. Gary Forsman on my book, who will go, well, hold on a minute. What's going on here? Let me look into this further. I have someone complaining here. This doesn't look right. But the Western doctors, they're just really going to give you a pill or surgery. Do you know what I mean? So if you go in and say you're depressed, they're not going to rule out the thyroid first and fix your thyroid so that you don't have depression. They're going to give you Prozac. It'll last 3 months and then it won't work anymore because your depression's from your thyroid problem. So again, Western medicine saves lives. It's also the 3rd leading cause of death in our country.
Correct.
So I mean, thank God for it, right? I mean, like, it saved my life a bunch of times. But on the other hand, we've got to tread lightly. So that's why I do implore people to seek out a functional medicine integrative physician. Chiropractors' offices know good people. Compounding pharmacies know good people for that. Anti-aging doctors. You're really not going to get much when you just go down the street for your standard PPO or HMO physical doctor. They have 5 minutes. They don't care about food. My quote dumb insurance doctor down the street, she is morbidly obese. I mean, I don't know what I can't do it. It's like, am I going to take any advice from her? Right.
I have a couple of rules for people to start with, and that is never go to a fat doctor. I mean, that just, never go to a broke investment advisor. That's right. If I walk into an office and my doctor is fat and out of shape and I'm trying to achieve quote unquote health, and it's obvious to me that according to the research and information that they're using, that morbid obesity amplifies every single condition and risk factor there is. And here is a doctor going to give me advice and is not able to maybe they know this stuff but aren't able to apply it. I don't want to deal with that person. They're incompetent in taking whatever they may know or not know and applying it. So I'm always like, I want an applied expert.
That's right. And I wouldn't go to a fat personal trainer either, but I'm also not a personal trainer. I'm not doing exercise videos. I'm not trying to be a shape model, right? So I may be fit and healthy and athletic, but I am not a bikini model, and I'm not trying to do that because that's not who I am and that's not my jam. But I certainly and I wouldn't want anyone to go to me for that because that's not my specialty, right? I mean, I work out, exercise, but that's not my jam. So yeah, I wouldn't go to a fat personal trainer. All the things that you just said. So we've got to choose our people wisely, and again, just realize that when you're going, the biggest thing that's hurt everyone I've ever talked to all over the world is they did what I did. And again, it's no one's fault. We expect, you went to medical school, you're a doctor, you should know this. I shouldn't have to learn it. I shouldn't have to learn this because I didn't go to medical school. And it's frustrating. It's frustrating because I don't want to learn it, right? No one wants to learn it. You should know. I'm coming to you. I'm paying you because you should know. The truth is if you've been diagnosed with anything, you better become your own expert. You better learn all you can about it because number one, you may meet a lot of uninformed doctors and spend a lot of years wasting your time. Or number two, you can't even help your doctor help you. There's so many people all over the world I've been able to coach who've gone back to their doctor. Now they have the information and they're able to impart it on the doctor. And even if the doctor doesn't understand it, the doctor is still willing at that point to go, I'll try it, right? They're going to be willing to practice medicine with you if you're more knowledgeable, even if they kind of don't know. I mean, which is, by the way, not really bright on their part, but hey, if you need to get someone to work for you in your favor. So I've seen that happen all the time. The more you're now there's some, you can be as educated as possible and you're going to come across an endocrinologist who is clueless, ego-ridden, and will not listen. I mean, okay, then you're at a dead end. But for the most part, you can bring some doctors around to kind of getting the treatment you need, but you have to educate yourself first so that you can tell them what kind of protocols you're willing to try. Like, for example, with thyroid hormone replacement. Now, you can also fix thyroid problems naturally. Well, then you don't really need a doctor for that. I mean, you could, if you have SIBO, you have serious gut stuff, you've got some autoimmunity, absolutely, you would want to go to a functional medicine doctor who can help you with all of those, the nutrient optimizations and everything else. But for the most part, those are things you can sort of do a little bit on your own through even free information that I give out or that you would find in these type of podcasts.
Yeah, I think it's important to recognize that the professionals that you hire are there for a particular level of expertise to give you information, feedback, provide testing parameters and stuff like that. But ultimately, the outcome and choices is still our own. And I want to swing this back to the health question in the definition of health. So we hear this is healthcare, healthcare program. We see all this languaging around healthcare, like we see the languaging around homeless.
It's more catastrophic. It's not healthcare, it's catastrophic.
Right. Or sick care or something, or acute,
Yes.
I think if we go back to the 1960s, and I've been using this as a pre-paving the way for the theories and applications that we're putting forth in our book coming up in September, Matt and I. And that is, in the 1960s, they introduced social security. And the life expectancy was around 67 years old. We got to about 80. And all of a sudden, now through special interest groups, lobbyists, government regulation, mandates, you name it, life expectancy has fallen off a cliff in recent years. It's in a death spiral. So I think a lot of the gains that we made in life expectancy was acute care. You got in for a surgery, a cancer treatment, an invasive, a car accident, all the development around that. But now the same institutions that we are trusting, quote unquote, with our health are now demonstratively, statistically failing. And I also look at our diet industry, and we have a 96% fail rate in people who are trying to manage their weight using virtually every different diet strategy that has been out there for the last 100 years. You can name, like, and they go in trends. If you've been around long enough, you see the trend rise and fall.
South Beach,
all of
Zone,
it.
Atkins. Yeah.
Correct. Okay. So all that, let's just toss this all aside. You're someone who didn't have lost your health or was compromised in the kind of life that you wanted to live. You regained it. So how would you define health for you today? And what would you advocate, say, in your books that people could be aspiring for?
I mean, I guess I'll give some details. Like, you wake up and in a bit, you should be ready to go brain-wise. So it doesn't mean you can't have a cup of coffee and take a minute. I don't wake out of bed, jolt up, and I'm like on in my email. I'm not suggesting that. But it shouldn't be like you're dragging for hours to get out of bed. That is a sign of an adrenal issue and or thyroid issue. The other thing is, you should be pooping every day. Okay. Everybody has to eliminate every day, maybe even more than once. Okay. That's something to look out for. So constipation is a huge symptom of low thyroid function. I struggled with that. It is an absolute disaster. I am so empathetic towards anyone. I haven't had a problem since, but by the way, Wade sells magnesium. Get on it if you need help with the poops. That is huge. I know so many people my age, and then I learned that they like poop once or twice a week, and this has been going on for years. And then I'm sitting down with them trying to go, why didn't I know this? This is unhealthy. So again, if you're someone who's thinking like this is healthy for you or this is normal, it's not. It's really not. And so these symptoms, lack of pooping, is a sign, right? Dropping and just like you cannot even stay awake in the afternoon. That says a lot about probably what you've eaten in the first half of the day, but it also could be thyroid or anything else. So again, it's like consistent energy. I wake up. Do you have the energy to work out? Look, some days do I not? Yeah, okay. But for the most part, energy to work out. And after exercise, you should feel energized and great, not exhausted and like a brick hit you. That's also a sign of adrenal fatigue and low thyroid function, like intolerance to exercise. So again, like, how are your relationships? How's your mind? How are your thoughts? Are you happy? Because everything that we eat, our thyroid hormones all contribute to the neurotransmitters and all of the happy and non-happy chemicals in our brain, serotonin, everything going on there. That's diet and lifestyle, right? So a lot of people adopt the kind of lifestyles and diets. I mean, I know you're plant-based, but your partner's like keto, and there's a little bit of in between there. But I know that you guys would agree essentially on certain food lists, things that would not be allowed.
80-20 rule, the Pareto distribution of stuff,
That's right. And that was Mark Sisson's original thing. He's like, look, if you could do this 80% of the time, you're going to be better off than most Americans. So can you do this 80% of the time? Maybe that's eating clean all week, and fine, you want to take the weekend. That's going to be better than what you were doing 7 days a week. So you have to start somewhere. And also too, sometimes it's just like, start small. So many people are like, I'm going to go to boot camp. I'm going to divorce my husband. I'm going to get a new job. And guess what? And it's not going to work out, and you won't lose a pound. Oh, and I'm going to YouTube the whole thing.
It's kind of in vogue to blame everything on men these days. We've screwed up the whole world, apparently.
I screwed up everything. And so, it's just it's like you're going to do all these things. Everyone always fails at that. You're making some grand plan. Sometimes it starts with get the canola oil out of your pantry. I mean, just sometimes it's just simple. Just start with switching out the bad oils for the good ones. Just start switching out bad salt for the good salt. No, I think it's crazy when people want to lose weight. They think somehow that they've got to go do something drastic, that they have to go work out. In fact, if you are really overweight, don't work out. I'm going to give you permission. Don't work out at all. Don't work out at all. Just get the eating right. Just start eating from the right food groups. You don't even have to limit calories at first. But again, you're getting rid of these toxic elements that are probably making you crave things and all of this. That's a start. And you will lose weight just sitting there. And then eventually you have that mental energy and you go, you know what? I feel like going for a walk. It's the people, though, that are doing it all at the same time. They've been sedentary. Now they're like, I'm joining a gym and da-da-da. Yeah, the first week they feel great. They're so proud of themselves. I've never seen it work.
So waking up clear. Pooping every day.
Waking up clear, pooping every day, great sleep, and also getting to bed at a decent hour, unless you are working a night shift. I push circadian rhythm for us. I feel like you should wake up with the light and you go to bed at dark, but some people can't control that. And if you're on a graveyard shift or something, you might have to take some extra steps because we know that it's a little unhealthy for people. So sleep, getting to bed at the right hour. 8 to 9 hours of sleep, I would say. I mean, maybe some people only need 7, but again, how are you sleeping? How are you pooping? How are you feeling? How's your energy? And how are your emotions? That's such a huge one, I think. Like if I eat too much sugar or if I were to eat a bunch of gluten or something, at some point, like it's going to affect my brain. I mean, I felt that a few days in after going off the reservation or something. And I'm not really allergic to any of those things. Okay. And I don't even have Hashimoto's that would be affected by the gluten. I feel off. It affects me, So how are you feeling?
One of the determinants I think is really valuable is Matt and I argued about sleep for, I think it was about a decade. And many of our discoveries were through our unique positionalities. And part of the new book is how we were able to resolve those. So I believe that open and respectful debate about various topics allows us to refine the resolution of what's the truth. And one of the things that we discovered was chronotypes. And which is the types, there's different types of sleep patterns. And I think there's a very small percentage of people who actually do well on a night sling, but most people, it's a disaster.
Right.
And I'm definitely not a night person. I remember doing night shift way back in university. I had this weekend shift, work night shifts. I respect everybody that works night shift.
Oh, so tough.
You guys are legends. Great job.
Absolutely legends. Yeah.
And I remember walking into, I was out at a party in Sedona a number of months ago. And I went into the gas station at, 1 o'clock in the morning or something I'm usually not out that time. And I talked to the lady behind the desk and I was like, hey, I just got to ask, like, are you into the night shift? She goes, oh man, I've been working night shift for 38 years and I love it. I love coming out at the end of the day and seeing the sunrise. And I was like, wow. That's cool, right? I never met anybody like that. So
yeah,
it was
really
interesting, and of course she's surrounded by like neon lights and sugar and there's a point where you can go down that road. This is not the podcast for it, obviously.
Well, and on that note, I'll point out someone in our space. So Melanie Avalon, who's also an author,
I know Melanie.
She is a night owl. She just can't, she has no time. She doesn't wake up till 11, 12. She's eating dinner at 11 at night. She's up until 3, 4 in the morning. So if I ever catch up with Melanie, it's always like, it'll have to be about like 6 or 7 p.m. my time. And then like 9 or 10 p.m. her time and she just, you know what I mean? But she also has, she doesn't have like 5 kids at home. She does all of the modalities and she's really into it. So again, it's not that you can't embrace it. And there are people that are natural night owls, but also you're going to have to mitigate that then, because if you're in a corporate position where you have to be at work at 8, then I'm sorry, maybe you can't be night owl or switch your job to accommodate your favorite, you're staying up late. I'm not a night person anymore. And again, back in the day, sleeping till 3 when you're 16 and out at the clubs, and okay, that's great. But now I really like to get up with the sun and have the natural circadian rhythm, and it is healthier. So if you can do it, try to do it. And if not, then hey, and maybe you love it.
I'm with you on that. I find the consistency of my sleeping and waking cycles, the more consistent that is, the better I feel, the easier it is to achieve what I call health. You touched on something I think is really important and underrepresented in regards to health. And we know that great social relationships is a big part of longevity.
Yes.
And sense of contribution, sense of well-being. We know that we went through a period recently where that was stripped away from most people or a good number of the population. And we're seeing the cascade of negative consequences overall. How do you feel, or what's your experience around happiness and quality of relationships as an indicator of your own health?
I think it is. And I think that's a great point. Okay. So there are some people that are, like, for example, the pandemic barely affected me in terms of that. Yes, I mean, I wanted to see my parents more, and sure, it would have been nice. I loved it. To me, it was like forced homebody, get stuff done. I kind of like simmered into it. But here's the thing, I had the luxury to do so. I know a lot of people didn't. It was really hard for them. Having a tribe, this is part of, Mark's book, Primal Connection. We are meant to be a part of a tribe, even if it's just one person, but we have to have one person that's like our person or cares about us, or we feel we belong to something. You know what I mean? So having a tribe is very important. And maybe it's, back then it might've been 12 or 15 or 30. But again, having a tribe is very important. So the reason I have a philosophy degree, and I occasionally like to bring these things up.
I love by the way, I'm happy that you have a philosophy degree. I wish that we taught more philosophy. I'm a philosophy debutante.
Great.
Right.
Yeah.
But I love the fact that you've done philosophy. Who is your best, before we get into, who is your most influential philosophers?
To be honest with you, I really would just go back to Socrates, because the dialogues are really easier to read for a lot of people. I think the conversations he was having people with on the street and the back and forth, I mean, it's sort of just like the beginning of like all of this stuff. And it's, to me, very exciting. And I don't know, it's a lot easier to read than, Sartre or Kierkegaard and some of this other heavy stuff, which of course you all have to do to get your degree. But I want to bring up Epicurus because, so we say Epicurean and people think Epicurus and food and drink and all that kind of stuff. But Epicurus, he really maintained that you needed like 5 things to be happy. Okay. And, one was freedom, one was friends, but he did not include romantic partnerships in there. He didn't include love. He felt that that was actually not necessary, because you can go have sex with anyone else, but you can't not have a connection. You can't not have friends, that you could live your whole life with friendship and be happy. And yeah, maybe you toss in a lover here and there away, but that's not essential, that friends were actually more important. And I mean, to some degree, I think that's really the case. There are a lot of people in this world that have not ended up in romantic relationships, but wonderful friend partnerships of some kind. And they're happy and they're sustained. I mean, maybe inside they would have liked a romantic relationship, but again, is it necessary? And he's saying it's not. So just to your point about friendship being so important, well, he would say it's the most important.
What were the other 3 things?
Okay, so you have to be free, which by the way is interesting because he did have some slaves. So that's a whole nother story. A little bit of hypocrite, baby. And then freedom, friendship, food, shelter, and then I don't know, I forget what the 5th one would be, maybe, but yeah, something like that. But kind of the basics. But friendship was involved in there.
That's
and he specifically, talked about romantic love and love being like, that's not, I mean, yes, it's nice, but you don't need it, but you have to have friends or you won't survive.
I think a lot of people fail to recognize that the idea of romantic love is relatively a new concept. Marriage was often for, if you look at the Indian culture, it's the idea of, hey, you're paired with someone that matches you sort of from the parental distribution of, what caste you're in or what economy or mental accommodability. But, and you just have kids. And then there's, that's the whole arranged marriage system, which is interesting enough. If you look at single parent, fatherless homes in India, I believe is 4%. And in America, it's 23 or 24%. So so you could have a partnership that's not maybe buried on love, but is still a functioning partnership as far as society goes, because we know the negative aspect of the other side of the equation.
Absolutely.
And going back to this, I don't know of anything of those components that isn't impacted by health.
Yeah, no.
So what was it like what was the aha moment for you when you realized, you know what, I'm not as healthy as I would like to be? And we kind of outlined your journey a little bit in the, I think it was episode 88 on the Paleo-Thyroid Solution, which is your book over there in the corner. I highly recommend it for everyone. I think there's a huge thyroid crisis out there. But what was the point where you said, something's not right? And then there was that, what you talked about, that journey of self-learning. And, it's kind of like when the Israelites escaped out of Egypt and then all of a sudden they're 40 years wandering the desert. Like it's kind
that
of—
was me.
Yeah. So what was the aha moment? And then how long did it take you to kind of be able to figure this out and find the experts that could give you the data that you could make that shift? And then how long has it been since you've been on this new pathway?
The Bioptimizer mission is to help more of the world fix their digestion at a core level.
The truth is, your digestion is only as good as your enzyme levels. Imagine trying to build a house with a tree. It's impossible. You need to chop the tree down into small pieces. Similarly, in order for your food to be used by your body, it must be broken down into a bioavailable form. And that's what enzymes do, converting protein into amino acids, fats into specific fatty acids, and carbohydrates into usable energy units. We start out with an abundance of enzymes, and that's why kids can digest just about anything really quickly. The thing is cooking food kills enzymes as they cannot survive at temperatures above 118 degrees. So years of this ends up depleting our bodies and leads to weak digestion. Taking digestive enzymes like masterclasses, which has an incredibly high level of protease for digesting protein, as well as other critical enzymes like lipase, amylase, and others is a total game changer. Suddenly you strengthen your digestion, eliminate gas and bloating, boost metabolism, and multiply your energy. Most importantly, you fix your digestion at a core level. To get started with Masszymes and to save 10% on your first order, go to masszymes.com. That's MASSZYMES.com and use the code MASS10, MASS10.
Okay, so right now I'm 49 years old. When I first had my first thyroid symptom, I was 30. Super in shape and fit, but wrong macros. I was doing low fat, low carb together, which again, if you're training for a bikini body competition, maybe that's the move, but
Sure.
not when you're living life normally and exercising at the output that I was. Who knows why I got it, okay? But I was definitely a sugar burning, carbohydrate dependent, and hangry and hypoglycemia and all that kind of stuff. But the first symptom I had is that I kept getting my period, and I was 30. And I had no history in my family, all the women, no weird gynecological history. And this is where that uninformed doctor, instead of going, why is a young, healthy 30-year-old with no history having menstrual irregularities? Instead of asking that question, which he could have, if he knew how to test my thyroid, it would have been fixed, assessed immediately that day. Instead, he just put me on a pill to mask the symptom of the bleeding. Well, I ended up bleeding through 3 birth control pills. And in that time, I had acne. My hair fell out and I blew up from 150. I'm 5 feet, 2 inches tall, so I'm short. I went from like 115 pounds and like maybe 17% body fat to like 160 pounds and about 40% body fat. Wow. And by the way, still exercise, doing the same things. Nothing had changed. It's not like I started eating donuts, right? In fact, I was eating less because I was like, why am I getting all this weight? So those were the symptoms of hypothyroidism. I was cold all the time. I had like 30 symptoms. And, look, anyone can go to just freethyroidmasterclass.com. It has a list of the 40 symptoms that are pretty much the normal ones. It's got a 2-hour video, a free thyroid guide, and you can kind of read a little bit about some of these horrible symptoms. So that was the first indication was, oh my gosh. And by the way, for women, it does manifest itself gynecologically, and same for men. So for men, it would be, like you're young and you're waking up and you don't have an erection. Red flag. I've coached many guys where that is the indicator because their testosterone drops.
Yep. So, and I think those are two.
By the way, but anything like, bowel movements, sex drive, like everybody should have a high sex drive. If you don't, something's probably off. And if you want one, I don't know why you wouldn't, but that's also a sign of ill health. We're meant to be that way. Now, I do know a few people in this world that kind of consider themselves asexual, but that's very rare. It's very rare.
So
libido being a sign of health, I guess I'd throw into that whole mix of.
So you got a problem. You notice this. You go to the doctor. You blow up.
I go to a bunch of doctors. No one's helping me.
How long is that? How long?
So I suffered for 7 years of my 30s, and it took so it was for 2 years. I went like undiagnosed, mistreated, misdiagnosed with other things. Then let me tell you, it wasn't medical experts that helped me get on the right path. It was a fellow patient. She's also a fellow author. I recommend her all the time because she's got the best website for thyroid health called Stop the Thyroid Madness. Her name is Janie Bowthorpe. She, at the time, did not have a book, but she had a patient-to-patient forum, like a group on Yahoo. And it was basically like people like me at the time who knew a lot, who were helping, patients to sort of assess what was going on. To this day, I could just tear up thinking about them. They saved my life. So it was really fellow patients that helped me get down the right path and learn the things I needed to learn to get to the right point. So then I dosed myself. I actually ordered my own thyroid hormones on the internet. Okay. So I was completely left in the dust, like black market operation. Dosed myself back to health, would use my PPO doctors for blood work and then never get their opinion on it. Just didn't even care what their opinion on it. I knew it was going to be wrong. I did it myself. So then I get back to health and I'm doing great. And I solved my hypothyroidism. And then a few years and I'm feeling great. I'm like, oh, thank God that's over. A couple of years go by. And then I finally, in that moment, I did find a doctor who kind of knew what was up. So I thought like, it's over. I find a doctor that kind of gets it. I'm feeling great now. Oh, I'm so glad I'll never have to deal with this again. A few years later, I started to get hypothyroid symptoms again. And I thought, well, this doesn't make sense. I'm on thyroid hormone replacement. Well, I didn't know enough, and none of the free people on that forum at the time knew enough. But what was happening to me is I was getting another issue with hypothyroidism called reverse T3, where basically the thyroid hormones I was taking to stay alive, one of those thyroid hormones was not doing its job. And so therefore, I was left in the dust a second time in 10 years. And this problem, a reverse T3 problem or a T4 to T3 conversion problem, really no doctors know what's up with that. They have, I mean, this is like, now it's a whole nother level of uninformed. Do you know what I mean? And so I was in the parking lot crying for the second time, going, oh my God, I have to do this myself. And again, I had to order my T3 from I'm dosing myself. I had to figure it out. And I did. The only doctor that helped me was when I eventually wrote the book. I wanted to get a doctor on there to confirm everything that I'm talking about because I'm not an MD. My doctor, Dr. Forsman, and at that time, he did save my life because even though I had fixed my thyroid, my hormone levels, when you're in a disease state for such a long time, things fall apart. And you know what? No amount of food and supplements sometimes get you there. Sometimes you need a functional doctor to go do some in-depth testing. And thank God he did. Because I had thick blood, I had excess fibrinogen, systemic enzymes saved my life, basically. And that's an expensive supplement. No Western doctor, if you took my CBC, you would have been like, you're doing great, keep doing it. Meanwhile, he takes all this in-depth workup and he's like, you're about to have a heart attack or stroke at the age of like 42. Because of these other factors, not having to do with my thyroid, but having to do with being in that disease state all that time, right? So again, I did need a partner at some point, right? And he's also, I also made the most comprehensive thyroid course on the planet called the Ultimate Thyroid Course. Dr. Forsman has 4 hours of tutorials in there going through gut health, detox, because here's the thing, if you're hypothyroid, you're getting toxic-y, and then you really aren't metabolizing everything and able to even detox from it. So even if you attempted to, you couldn't. And so then once my thyroid was great and I was feeling great, I still had some other symptoms, like I had some excess inflammation and some other things going on that I just was like, it's not my thyroid. And then finally, thankfully, I met him because of the book. He did in-depth testing. We did sensitivity tests. We did all sorts of things. And he really helped sort of clean me out and get me to another level. I also had horrible mercury. I had really high heavy metals. Again, no amount of thyroid hormone is going to fix that. No amount of eating the right foods is even going to fix that. At some point, you got to dive in deep. I mean, I had to take, natural chelation pills and do sauna. And, I did it. But thank God he had found that, right? So that's the reason to go to a functional medicine, an integrative physician, a DO, someone who's going to do like more exploring. You're going to get what you pay for with them. They're spending a couple of hours with you. So that's really how I became an expert. I had to fix myself twice in 10 years. But as a result, becoming that expert, but also understanding what it's like to go through a reverse T3 problem and how to treat it, because that is very rare. And there's only really one other author who in the world out there who has that experience. So I know what it feels like. And I know what it's like to go through that on all levels of thyroid. And so again, 2 bad bouts in 10 years. And it really took away about 7 years of my 30s, which, I wish I could get back, but
yeah, it's a wild story. And then how long have you been kind of symptom free since you've kind of...
for, let's see. So, it's probably since 2013 or 2012, because around 2011 is when I got the reverse T3 problem, was pretty on top of it, figured it out somewhat quickly. And then I met Mark Sisson about like a year after being on T3 only. And then here's really what inspired me. I was working for Mark and his wife, and they're 20 years older than me. And anyone can Google Mark Sisson and Carrie Sisson, and like your eyes will explode at how good they look. And they're both like, he's turning 70 this year, and she's like 68. And I mean, like bikini body kind of types. And I was working for them and I was like, oh my God, they are 20 years older than me and they look way better than me. Like, and they're not in the gym all the time. Like maybe I should read his book. maybe I should. I'm working for the guy. And so that really changed my life, was getting on this different paradigm, not this zone thing, not this, that's sort of all I knew, was that kind of keep your insulin steady, eat every 2-3 hours. And that really doesn't work for me.
How many people do you think are suffering from
200 plus million people in the world are the statistics. 60% are undiagnosed, and 25 plus million Americans alone just take one prescription of thyroid hormone. So now, when I wrote the book in 2016, the statistics were that the number one prescription in the US was Synthroid, which is just one thyroid hormone, one modality of treatment. There's plenty of others. So that's just one, 25, number one prescription. I was looking over those stats recently to see if they had changed. Do you have any idea what the top prescriptions now are for in our country?
Oh.
Autoimmune diseases.
Mm.
By the way, we know, it's documented already, we know the connection between gluten and autoimmune disorders. So that alone could be probably part of the issue with all this crappy food out there and processed this and that. So I was shocked to see that, but not really, because I know autoimmune disorders are on the rise. I see it all the time with Hashimoto's and other things. So that I was like, oh, wow, it's interesting that it shifted from like thyroid being the number one medication to a laundry list of various autoimmune diseases, whether it's lupus or this. And of course, we know about the type 2 diabetes medications that are just, flooding the market because of the problem there. So those are the stats. And so the other statistic is that this does disproportionately affect women. And so men might be discounted for it and may have different symptoms, but they usually are the same. Again, usually it's an exhaustion, a brain fog, a general malaise, you're tired. That's how it starts. You're cold, could be sexual stuff. Then an onslaught of things can happen, but that's kind of how it starts. Or like, I'm gaining weight and I can't lose weight. You know what I mean? So like that's kind of the thing. And you tried everything. That's another symptom. But usually it does go hand in hand with exhaustion, brain fog, and that kind of thing. So you would really know that you had a thyroid problem or something would be wrong. You'd be complaining.
Why do you think that it's more prevalent in women or more diagnosed in women as opposed to men? Any ideas?
I don't. I mean, other than to say that perhaps biologically in general, because of what we go through every month, maybe we are a little bit more sensitive as a species to certain things, perhaps. I mean, I'm not denying the strength of women. Of course, I'm a feminist. I love women. You know what I mean? But you know what I mean? So I have no idea. I've never actually found any information on that as to why. That could just be a guess.
Well, I think it's interesting because if we look at men's testosterone levels right now, the average 20-year-old has the testosterone levels of a 70-year-old man in the 1970s.
Oh my God, that's so sad.
Right? So if you think about that, and hormone health is oftentimes connected to thyroid. Could you explain some of the thyroid connections to hormonal health? Because a lot of people think, oh, I can't tell you how many young men, 20s and 30s, who I know personally, who are kicking ass in all their other aspects of life, and they're on TRT therapy. And I'm like, dude,
it's too young.
What are you doing on TRT? Like, what's going on there, right? Like, have you considered? And they go, okay, yeah, I just take some testosterone from my doctor, and it's no big deal. And I'm like, yeah, but there's bigger issues going on if that's the case. What's the connection?
So the thyroid, which is a gland that for men would be right below your Adam's apple, it literally is in charge of the production and regulation of your sex hormones. So that's why infertility and miscarriages run rampant, and why you should never try to become pregnant sometimes it's an accident, but you should never try to become pregnant unless you do rule out the thyroid, because you don't want a miscarriage that you didn't need to have. So because of that, so for example, I had a 25-year-old guy who came to me and he had been put on testosterone by the doctor because he did have less testosterone. The question should have been, that's not right. He's 25. Let's go look at his thyroid, because that's the thing that produces and regulates all the sex hormones anyway. Let's go check that. So he comes to me, he's like, I don't know. I said, I think you have a thyroid problem. We got it checked. He had a horrible reverse T3 thyroid problem. Once we finally got him and his doctor good with like thyroid hormone replacement, he weaned off the testosterone, and the natural testosterone went right back up. Because, once you start introducing exogenous hormones into the body, you are shutting down your natural production. So honestly, like, unless you're trying to do like extra juicing garbage that most people shouldn't be doing anyway, you don't need testosterone as a man until you get to the point where it's absolute garbage. Maybe that is 60, maybe it's 55 for some people. And I'm sure there might be other issues. I mean, I know someone who had a pituitary tumor. Okay, well, then in that case, the signals aren't being sent to produce testosterone. That person would need it. But when you're young, and this happens to women, they start to get, weird periods and like the things that happen to me. And so they put on the pill, or the doctor goes, oh, your estrogen's low. They check the thyroid first. Same with the mental health, because we have more receptors for the biologically active thyroid hormone in our brain than anywhere else, which is why it affects the brain. So for example, one of the symptoms of hypothyroidism is I'm a total coordinated athlete, and I would be like knocking into stuff, really uncoordinated. And I'd be like, why am I so klutzy? That kind of stuff. Messy handwriting, not being able to like remember, can't speak the words right. They're coming out backwards like a dyslexic, brain stuff, and so it affects the brain so much. So that goes to the whole, you go to the doctor, you're depressed, they give you Prozac. Did you check the thyroid first, man? I talked to the head of a psychiatric hospital here in Los Angeles. And I said to him, hey, before you put people on like SSRIs and all this stuff, are you fully checking like a comprehensive thyroid panel? They don't. That's malpractice to me. Why would you do that? If you know the depression can possibly be coming from somewhere else, why wouldn't you rule it out? It's no different than the doctor who first put me on the pill to control bleeding without going, why is she bleeding? That's not right for a 30-year-old to be bleeding. And had he known, thyroid hormones. So if you're out there and you had some hormonal imbalance, but you're trying to correct it through hormone replacement, you may not be getting anywhere, and you not be actually like targeting and hitting the problem. So that's why you always have to rule that thyroid out. Like that 25-year-old kid, I had a 42-year-old who was, I was coaching recently. He was not getting erection, it was not good in the sexual department, and he's really fit and a good looking dude. And, it was a real bummer. And as a woman, I'll do everything I can to help guys with it. I don't want any guy out there not being able to have this happen to them. So it was not only a thyroid, he was mistreated on thyroid hormone replacement. That was the first thing. So he was still very hypothyroid on really bad doses of thyroid hormone, and they didn't know what they were doing. So we fixed that. He also found out he had horrible toxic like plastics, which far infrared sauna is really the answer for that. And so he went through that. So, sometimes it may be a couple of steps, you got to dig deeper. Like I solved my thyroid problem, but there were a few things that were off. Well, thank God, Dr. Forsman found the heavy mercury and the other things that I couldn't really quantify it. I can't really qualify it to this day. If you were like, how did it feel when you had high mercury? All I can say is that I noticed a difference when I knew the mercury was gone. Like after months of sauning and taking the pills, I remember going, I think the mercury's got, I don't know. There was some clearness mentally. I almost can't even qualify it. So thank God I had him look into that. So again, when we're talking about hormone health, sexual health, you should have a very high sex drive. Everything should be working great down there for men and women. And if you're having issues, infertility, miscarriages, PCOS, endometriosis, any kind of gynecological stuff, or you're not getting erections in the morning or don't have a sex drive, that's an indication. But so in his case, it was mistreatment of thyroid hormone plus toxicity. So sometimes, again, thyroid is not going to be the only answer, and you might need to keep going once you fix that. But better to go in the detox direction once you already have a good baseline for your thyroid, because now you're a normal person with normal methylation and everything's normal. You're at like the right body temperature. Now your body can actually really detox from things. So that might be the first order of business, but you might need to keep going.
Yeah, I know there's a couple of really interesting studies. So just for people to know, Tony Robbins, who wrote a book on health, almost died of mercury poisoning.
Did he?
Yeah, he was on blood transfusions before his events, even as late as 2 years ago, because he was trying to detox from mercury. It was so high; it was the highest recorded levels of mercury in history.
Somehow, how did that happen to him?
He believes it was because he ate mostly salad and sea fish. And Jeremy
Piven is an actor who from Entourage, and he had come out and said he was completely a pescatarian, ate a ton of sushi and stuff. Yeah.
So that's one thing. The other thing is when it comes to your thyroid, one of the big minerals is iodine. And of course, they're members of the halogen family, which has fluoride and chlorine. Could you speak a little bit maybe about that interaction? Because I know there's a lot of people who are swimming in chlorinated pools, drinking chlorinated water, pounding fluoride toothpaste. And this could be taking down their thyroid over time because they bond with the thyroid. Can you talk a little bit about that as a kind of an indicator, and then maybe cue up some other things in your class that might be relatively important?
I bring this up all the time because people will research hypothyroidism and see that iodine is connected, and then they run out and they get a very high strength, like Lugol's iodine, like really high, and they start jamming themselves with it, which can cause problems. So again, this is like, you got to be educated and take this lightly. So back in the day, the Midwest of the United States was once called the goiter belt.
That's right.
What's a goiter? Well, it's an enlarged thyroid gland. It can look like a baseball bat or like a baseball or like a
softball right in the side of your neck.
That's right. And so what they did back then is they iodized salt, and it seemed to help. Now, granted, it's still crappy salt. I wouldn't, but that was sort of like the solution. Why was it the goiter belt? Well, because apparently, according to people, they're like, well, here's the thing. There's not a lot of ocean air, seawater, and it's not getting into the ground, growing the food. So there's a lack of iodine in this area. So again, maybe not now, but maybe back then. So that's what they used to call it. And maybe there were more people in the Midwest. I'm from the Midwest. I don't know that it was a lack of iodine.
A little incident on that, just a little sidebar. Yeah. They also looked at the research and it increased the IQ levels by 15 points when people were taking iodine versus non-iodine, like people who were deficient in iodine versus people who had healthy levels. So going back to the brain connection.
Yes. I'm not shocked about that. And I will say this, most people though, in this world, I don't see a lot of iodine deficiency. It's not that it couldn't be optimized. It's not that you couldn't look, like most thyroid support complexes have a little bit of iodine in it. It's just kind of like, it's a nice little trace amount. It's not going to be milligrams. It's going to be micrograms. The iodine that I use every now and then, because I sometimes do swim and I swim in chlorinated pools. Could that have given me a thyroid problem many years ago when I swam every day? Sure. Could smoking cigarettes back in the day have given me? Sure. I mean, I don't know what caused it, right? I also had a CoQ10 deficiency, I find out later, in selenium. And so selenium and iodine are very, very important for the thyroid. Selenium for the conversion of T4 to T3 and iodine for the whole damn thing. So what I do is I take iThyroid. iThyroid is made by a company called Acela, who makes actually thyroid hormone replacement, but they make iodine in these pills, and I take 6.25 milligram, like the lowest of their dose, and that's a pretty high dose of 6 milligrams. I will take it before I go swimming. I also will completely cover my body in coconut oil, and it lasts about 30 minutes. So I do everything I can to try to mitigate chlorine coming into my body. Most of the time, adults who are beyond, like teen years don't need fluoride anymore in their toothpaste. You could use it, but again, is it hurting you? Is it helping you? They say, oh, eating raw cruciferous vegetables is bad for thyroid. Okay, it could be not. Jury's out. Some people say cooking them is better. How about you just avoid them anyway for right now? You know what I mean? It's like, if jury's out, let's just shovel it to the side, because that's probably the best move. It is important to get iodine. You can get it through sea vegetables. You can take a thyroid support complex if you don't have a thyroid problem and you're like, I don't want this to happen to me. Her story sounds awful. Great. Pure Encapsulations, I have no affiliation with the company. They make a great thyroid support complex that has tyrosine, a little iodine, a little ashwagandha, all of the things to kind of help with the whole program. So it is important. If you've never taken iodine in your life, you could always get it tested. But again, you can just usually get it through food. But if you don't, and you don't eat fish and you don't eat seaweed, could you put some dulse flakes in your food? Sure. The best way to do is just get tested and see, do you really need to optimize it? And so sometimes when people are naturally trying to fix their thyroid problem, it's a combination of really nutrient optimization. That is, like maybe a good multi, if they've got an MTHFR gene mutation, needs to do methyl B12 folate, then it would be like D, omegas, magnesium, selenium, some iodine, but you can kind of get those all into like a thyroid support formula. So, so chlorine displaces iodine, and so does, and they're putting it, is it bromine is the other one that they use instead of chlorine? I don't know about.
You use ozone. They use ozone in a lot in Europe.
Yeah, and what's there's a couple pools here, but I'm not exactly sure what that is.
Ozone is O3. It's a kind of
is it problematic or is it safe?
It can be in high dosages. So, for example, I have a HOCAT machine here in my house. You have to come by and try that out someday. It's really cool. Awesome. Basically, you're encapsulated in steam. It pumps CO2 in for 3 minutes. That opens up your pores, and then you go through a steaming process where you have ozone added into the steam. And ozone's relatively easy to make. Now, it's something that's okay topographically, but it's not something that you want to breathe. It's toxic breathing, but it'll go in and kill pathogens, parasites, bacteria culture, viruses, all of that sort of stuff. It was a treatment for cancer. And so this was used in pools to kill off the bugs as a safe and easy way to do it without chlorine. It's not popular here in North America, although I do know a lot of people on the high end side of the economic scale who have installed ozonated pools.
Yes, or saltwater pools.
Yeah. And so it's a very effective way of doing that. I think,
so the end result is, yes, look into it. Please get some into your life. If you don't have any health problems now, fractally dose it into your world, make sure you maybe top that off. If you do have a thyroid problem, you get tested, look into it. Maybe it's one of the nutrients you have to get. However, I have seen lots of thyroid patients over the years, their labs are screwed up, their iodine's fine. So in that case, a doctor would be giving iodine to someone who necessarily might not need it. And in large doses, it can cause some bad detox effects, and it can really mess with Hashimoto's and stuff. So again, just don't run out there and do that. By the way, I made that mistake. So I'm here to tell you, I was that person who Googled it one day and then back in the day and just started taking, iodine. And then it turns out I actually didn't even have a deficiency. So
can you, I want to wrap this up in a great way, because you've got so much information and it's so nuanced, and you understand the test, some of the dietary suggestions, some of the detox recommendations and daily recommendations for people who might be struggling getting in their best weight, feeling their most optimum, most cognitively efficient. Please share with us your courses, who they're for, what they're about, and what they're going to learn inside of them.
Sure. Well, I'm the author of 2 books. The first one is The Paleo Thyroid Solution, and the other one is called Confident as FU*K. So I've got 2 free masterclasses. One is on confidence, that's 90 minutes, and I have an hour and 45-minute free thyroid masterclass. This is where everyone should go. If you want to learn more beyond what I've said, what that is it's a video of me for an hour and 45 minutes, just telling you everything about this so that you can wrap your head around the whole thing. I talk about all the tests, the feedback loop, how it all works, so you really get a good in-depth tutorial. It also comes with my free thyroid guide. In there, the list of tests, when to get tested, how do I call a doctor's office, and what questions should I ask them to make sure I'm not going to waste my money. Do you know what I mean? Now, that's not foolproof, but that will eliminate a lot of people based on their answers. So I provide this guide for you that gives you podcast episodes, articles, and everything you need to really kind of get jump started, because I spent thousands of dollars I didn't have all the way back then, and it was wasted. I don't want people to do that. I'm happy giving free information. This is the most in-depth, free, one-shot place you're gonna get it. And you can just go to freethyroidmasterclass.com. Everything is at my website, though, elleruss.com. You can click on free stuff. And I also have online courses in both of those subjects. The Ultimate Thyroid course is really the big, deep dive. That's like 30 hours. We're talking multiple experts, success stories, in-depth protocols of me going through on video, 25 examples of lab work, male, female, all ages, looking at it going, what's the problem here? What are the possible approaches to this problem? What could be done? What's right or wrong? Is there a right or wrong? Is one choice better than the other? So you start to, as a patient, understand how to look at labs and read these things and sort of start to understand it. And on top of that, I also do in-depth dosing protocols. By the way, no one has a thyroid course out there at all, pretty much, but definitely not like this, where I'm going in-depth dosing protocols on T3, natural desiccated thyroid, all the variables, so that you can arm yourself with going into your doctor and going, can we maybe try this? This protocol might be something I'd like to try. So it's just 30 hours of content. It's really comprehensive, and it is less than a functional medicine doctor appointment. So I just say empower yourself with the knowledge that I gained and now I'm imparting to you so that you can get from A to Z really quick. Because I get people all the time, it's been 10 years, I'm hopeless. I want to go back to the beginning. Wade, the only two reasons people suffer, you're dealing with a doctor that doesn't know how to deal with it, or you don't know, or both. It's only one or the other, because every one of these things is solvable. And people hear that and they go, well, that seems easy, but I've been struggling for 10, 15 years. And you go, yeah, because you just don't know it. And that's why you ended up here. And now you do. And let's get you fixed up. And a lot of those people do, it's hard. It's a tough day when you look back in hindsight and realize that they should have had the answers for me. Why did I suffer for 10 years? Why did I lose 7 years of my 30s? I know people who lost 30 years of their life. It's a tough day, Wade. You're balled up curled up and you're crying because you feel like you've been crapped on. You feel almost gaslit. You're like, these people all should help me. And so that day you realize that they're not going to, and you need to, is a tough one. But at least you can arm yourself with the knowledge, because knowledge is what got me better, not a doctor.
Moving from victim to victor by not expecting someone's going to come and save you. That's cool for the movies. It's not relative for your health. But if there is someone here to save you, it's Elle. So check out her masterclass. The show notes are all in here, the links and everything. Please go check out her website. I've been in the industry for my whole life, literally. It's a long, long time. We're now going on 4 decades, I'm 50 now. So wow. We have to call a spade as a spade. And this is a huge issue for so many people that can be solved, and you've solved it. And you've not only solved it for yourself, you've put all this together for
thousands of people, you guys. It's actually really not difficult. I mean, literally, I'm going to be honest with you, unless you have multiple problems, like you have Lyme disease and EBV and you're going through menopause. Okay. That's a lot. That might take longer than a few months. But in general, this doesn't take more than a few months to get back your life. So you could be suffering for 15 years and you're better within 3 to 6. Are you kidding me? I mean, it's really that easy. And so again, unless there's multiple problems, it might take a little longer, but it's pretty quick.
There you go, folks. You need to take action today with our guest, Elle Russ. Thank you for joining us today. I really appreciate it. It's always a pleasure communicating. You're such a great communicator. You're so enthusiastic and you know your topics. I love having you. Can't wait to have you back again for some more fun in a future episode. And for all you listening, if you know someone who is suffering from thyroid conditions, or maybe tune them onto this podcast, it might change their life. And there's nothing that feels better than the joy and happiness you experience when you share something of value with someone you care about and see them produce a positive result. You feel great, they feel great, and the chain keeps moving forward, because we all are a human family. And that's part of why we are here, to care and to share. I'm Wade T. Lightheart. This is the Awesome Health Podcast from Bioptimizers. See you on the next episode. At Bioptimizers, our mission is to fix digestion. And a cornerstone of digestion is gut flora. P3OM is our patented probiotic formula. In fact, we call it the Navy SEALs of probiotics. You see, strong proteolytic or protein digesting activity is paramount to having a healthy gut flora. And of course, P3OM provides that. The good news is, unlike weaker probiotics, P3OM survives the digestion process. What it does is it basically multiplies the good guys while protecting you against pathogens, or what some people call the bad guys. P3OM really helps to rebuild your digestion. And what that allows you to do is to maximize nutrient uptake, energy, and metabolism. To find out more of how P3OM can help you, go to www.bioptimizers.com.
Thank you for listening to the Bioptimizers Awesome Health Podcast. You can find more information at bioptimizers.com.